the real challenges for low cost, or for actually cutting cost and at the same time keep the ATM performance up, could be summarized, and I'm sure there could probably be a list of 10 issues. I will focus on people, collaboration, cost, momentum, and fixed cost, because I think those are the most significant in terms of actually achieving any sensible results and keep the service level up, which is the issue that everybody is trying to strive for. Somebody says we want, of course, more for less, but sometimes if less is the most important, it could be less for less. If you start to look at the airline, what does actually low cost mean for an airline? If you look at the expenditure here, you see clearly when you break it down that services and supplies is a very big portion of this, and staff is certainly a big one as well. You've seen similar figures earlier today. One, when fuel is lumped together with an en route and other charges as here, it quickly becomes clear how dependent on external services and supplies airlines are. Secondly, if we make the observations here and look at the difference in staff cost, you see that the flag carriers or the legacy carrier almost have twice the staff cost as the low-cost carrier. So I don't know if the complex hubbing networks contribute to this, but it might be an effect, and also the way they operate and, of course, the way they pay people. The third observation on this slide, if we compare the investment and depreciation, with moderate growth, the flag carriers balance investment and depreciation, and that is logical, I think. The low-cost carriers, however, are definitely not low investment, and quite the opposite, as you see from this slide. High investment is needed for growth, but also to keep costs low. And if we now add a provider, if flag carriers spend twice as much on staff as low cost, then ANSPs are nearly twice as much again on top of that, if you compare it this way. And a business which spends 50% of its outgoings on staff would seem to be one where productivity is derived principally from people. You say that this chart shows ATM as being in the business of connecting staff with customers, and this may be how we work. I mean, it is very staff intense, but is that really what we do? ANSPs are much less dependent on external services and suppliers, much more in control over their own expenditure, which you can also see on the slide, and more importantly, these services and supplies are variable cost. So in the case of an airline, if you cut flights, these costs goes down. This is not exactly the same thing with an ANSP. If we now look at flexible capital, although the capital expenditure rates of the ANSPs are similar to the low-cost carriers, there is an important difference. Low-cost carriers are essentially investing in their fleet. Modern, efficient, yes, but they are also movable. You can move airplane from one part of the world to another. You can move it from where the demand is and from one market to another. Time again we've seen their ability when demand is not sufficient, when they cannot find enough incentives to encourage the passenger to travel, or when the operating conditions are not right, to pick up their capacity and move to somewhere else. As soon as you move on to the ANSPs, you will see that there is always one foot on the ground. The capital is fixed. Basically all of what an ANSP invests in is in one way or another connected to the geographical area in which they operate. Couple this with the lower variable cost that we saw earlier, and what you get is a slower rate of response. An airline can change today. Within days of Aer Lingus cutting back at Gatwick, EasyJet announced that it would step into the gap. We've seen many of those situations appear in the last couple of years when somebody has decided to leave the business. An ANSP cannot respond on the same timescales. Its roots go much deeper than that, and that's part of the problem. So the theme of the people continue now into the field, into the first challenge, and this is where we see that we still generate quite a bit of ATFCM, air traffic flow and capacity management delay, by staff, and this is an indication that the staff is a very essential part of the present way of doing business. And even with Cesar coming around the corner, we still believe that ATM will be very dependent on staff. Investment in technology needs to be seen and accepted not as a de-skilling, but maybe instead as a reskilling, and it's a matter of actually reducing the relative workload on the controller to actually improve the productivity. Moving on to the second challenge, that is truly about collaboration. And aircraft operators, ATM and airports have in many cases very different agendas. And we have seen a few very good results, especially in the airport CDM, collaborative decision making, where we have seen significant improvements in performance at those places when they have actually applied that. But at the same time, we also discovered a lot of difficulties in get those three to actually cooperate. So the collaboration and the relationship with each other is the second challenge in order to actually pick the advantages that you can do in order to improve efficiency. The third challenge here, which has not been actually mentioned as much as all the other, which is a little bit repetitive, is the momentum of cost. And this particular example is Ryanair. And I think you can draw the conclusion out of this slide that once you get into a slower growth rate, when something is not completely new, there is a tendency that cost is actually creeping upwards without you doing anything except adding to retired people, to paying small promotions and inflation or cost things. So it's easier to keep the productivity up if you are growing very quickly. And when you get into a more stable situation, it's more difficult. So what if we take the example of NATS again and add that to the slides? And I'd like to stress now first that they are different scales, but they are put together with the different scales just in order to show the fact that NATS has been, in terms of productivity gains, in this particular case is flights per employee versus passenger per employee, and you see a similar pattern. So I think that what this particular slide shows is that the opportunity for productivity gains is as good in general in an ANSPs as it is in an airline. So there we have very similar problem, and we've also been achieving on both sides similar results. Maybe moving on to the final challenge here, which is the legacy and fixed cost. And this particular slide show also a gate-to-gate support cost per composite flight hours for Europe. And you see that there has been a steady decrease in these costs. The cost per flight hour, the total cost, including delay cost, which is not something that airlines pay directly to the ATM provider, but incurred in their bottom line, is about 477 euro, and if you exclude the delay cost, is 410. So you see here that more than half is actually legacy and fixed cost for a provider, but that particular cost has been actually pressed down over the last several years. So this is not maybe not directly corresponding to what you see at the unit rate, because the unit rate is also something that is very much dependent on the amount of traffic. So a very constructive provider will tell airlines that if you want us to keep the price down, you bring the flights to my area, and then we will be able to stick there. But if flights suddenly disappear, these kind of costs will not be possible to change overnight. Coming to the conclusion, productivity gains, the answer is yes. ANSPs could actually achieve a similar achievement as an airline could do. Lower cost, certainly yes, but it will never, an ANSP will never be something like a full low-cost carrier, and that is because of the infrastructure nature of an ANSP compared to a low-cost carrier that go where the people are and are free to move their capital investment to where the market is. So I don't foresee that we will see a sort of full-fleshed low-cost carrier type of ANSP in the future, but lower cost for sure, and productivity gains is also certainly possible to achieve. Thank you very much.